Today, as we commemorate the life of Dr. King, I can't help but reflect on the March on Washington, almost 60 years later, August 1963. It was a day I will never forget as a 12-year-old looking for my mom on a black and white TV among a diverse gathering of 250,000 attendees at the Lincoln Memorial. Not able to find her, I had no idea what to expect. But this path to justice led us to a change in American history that we will never forget. I hope that we will remind and enlighten you this afternoon that unity is diversity with a common goal. Today, the Midland community will present our theme, Journey to Justice, through the help of our signature underwriter, Lincoln Learning Solutions, and our sponsors, PA Cyber Charter School, Midland Borough School District, Lincoln Park Performing Arts Charter School, Baden Academy, Midland Innovation and Technology Charter School, our newest member, and Lincoln Park Performing Arts Center, producer. On behalf of the Midland Women's Civic Club, thank you so much for your continued help to support the Greater Midland Scholarship Foundation that assists graduating seniors to further their education. It is an honor and a blessing that we can uphold Dr. King's quote each year, "Intelligence plus character, that is the goal of true education." Thank you to all of our writing contestants, interviewers, and performers who are students and an alumnus from some of our sponsoring schools. And what a blessing that 3 civil rights activists from our own community are still here to share their experiences of this historic and world-changing march. Mrs. Ruby T. Golding, Mrs. Dorothy James, and Mrs. Mary T. Wilson. And we are so honored to have Rutha Harris, an original member of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee and a freedom singer, to join us on this phenomenal journey. Finally, thank you, Dr. Todd Allen, for graciously accepting our invitation as narrator of this program. Dr. Allen is a native of Beaver Falls, Pennsylvania, and Vice President of Diversity Affairs at Messiah University, who we admire for his knowledge and expertise of the civil rights era. It seems that he is ready, and all of our marchers are here. So let our journey to justice begin as created January 16, 2023 in Midland, Pennsylvania.
August 28, 1963. Today we remember that moment as the day the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom occurred. Organized by labor leader A. Philip Randolph and civil rights activist Bayard Rustin, the march brought together leaders from civil rights, labor, and clergy to advocate for civil and economic rights for African Americans. With over 250,000 persons in attendance, the day represented a high point in the movement in what had been a very turbulent time. These 60 years later, the March on Washington has become a model for other demonstrations that occurred in the nation's capital. While today we tend to look back on the march with fondness and admiration, at the time there was doubt outside as well as within the movement about how successful a march would be. Would the march be peaceful? Would people show up in support? And if so, how many? And what successful legislation would result from these efforts? With the passing of time, we now realize what an impactful moment this was. So this year, as we reflect on the life and legacy of Dr. King, we thought it fitting to remember one of the more iconic moments in his public ministry. Throughout the program, you're going to hear testimonies of persons who were in attendance at the march, learn songs of the movement from an original SNCC freedom singer, listen to young people as they reflect on what the movement means to them, and of course, hear the powerful words of Dr. Martin Luther King as he shared a challenge and a dream with the nation.
L So what would be your advice for any people who want to affect change now?
Yes. First, I think you should try to talk things out first. Just try to talk to each other and not at each other before you try to start protesting. That's the advice I would give.
Is there anything you guys would like to reflect on from back in the 60s? Anything that you would you remember as a good moment?
It's a lot. And the main thing is that when we had the march in Washington, that's something I'll never forget. With all the people there and how peaceful it was just like having one big family. And to have heard Dr. King's speech, I think he had in mind that he wasn't going to sound like a preacher. And then all at once, he started off, "I have a dream." Everything got so quiet. And when he spoke, we just stood there speechless.
I mean, there's people.
I'll never
you just
forget that.
Arm in arm. I mean, you can't imagine how many people. That's all you do.
That's wonderful.
Over 250,000 people.
That's crazy.
And I know there was a church council, and they prepared lunch for 85,000 people. They thought they were doing something. And we was around there hungry. We couldn't even get anything, not one thing to eat.
Nobody was ready for all you guys to be there.
Yes. Reflect on that.
So I know you have your picture here for us. Do you want to explain to us what those are from?
Yes, this is the ticket that I used on the train ticket. And this is just a button that you
They gave us
bought.
when we marched.
And this one is the picture that I took of Martin Luther and Coretta. And to talk with him, he had a nice soft voice. And Coretta, she more with us too. And we really just had a nice time.
Thank you for sharing that.
It's old.
You can tell by us, huh?
No, I'm going by.
no, I was talking to her.
And back there, too, people seemed to think like it was black against white. But that wasn't an issue. It was right against wrong. And so, and right always win.
And some things will never change because some people will think like they think that they're superior.
Mm-hmm.
We couldn't have gotten as far as we did without
Yes,
the help of our white people.
friends.
And there was another, George McClyde.
Yeah.
He almost lost his business because he was helping us so much here in Midland. Because you can't do it alone. You have to work together. So you girls keep in mind.
Okay,
Do
what we
everything you
started.
can.
Absolutely. We'll keep it going for you guys.
Yeah.
Right. Right. Keep things improving.
We can talk about how you guys traveled to get there.
Oh,
the
we
journey you took?
traveled to Pittsburgh, and we got on the Freedom train. That's what they call it, the Freedom train. And after arriving there, people was everywhere, and
you
that
just
was it,
interacted
because we
with
didn't
the
have a
people.
long time to wait, because when we got there, it was about time for the march.
What do you all remember from the day of the March on Washington?
Oh, gracious.
The one thing, it was the togetherness.
Mm-hmm.
All the people there, and
And it was so
No
so
fights, no
peaceful.
cursing, stuff
So
like
peaceful, so peaceful. But that's what you can remember, the people. all the people.
When Dr. King walked out in front of the podium, the crowd just went crazy. It was really a beautiful experience.
And that's about all I can say.
It was just a nice program, but he was just
He was the
there.
main one after he got.
The main thing, though, it seemed like to me was the togetherness.
Yeah, definitely the unity of everybody.
It wasn't black, white. It looked like it was just something that you'll never forget. You didn't hear anyone arguing or having a disagreement or anything. It just looked like it was just a love. That's what I remember so much together.
Excited to be here with Miss Rutha Harris, one of the original SNCC Freedom Singers. Miss Harris, I guess I'd like to start with this question because not everybody may be familiar with SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, or the Freedom Singers. So who were the SNCC Freedom Singers?
They were a group of young people who were fighting for civil rights. And the Freedom Singers were organized during the Albany Civil Rights Movement in the year of 1962. We were organized for the purpose of raising funds for the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. This group traveled 50,000 plus miles in 9 months, telling the story of the civil rights movement through song. We traveled to 46 states. At that time, there were only 48 states, and there were only 4 of us: Bernice Johnson Reagan, Cordell Reagan, Charles Nebelich, and Rutha Harris.
How did you become a Freedom Singer?
I became a Freedom Singer because I was singing in the during the mass meetings I was singing at the mass meeting during the civil rights movement, and my voice was heard, and I was chosen.
At the mass meetings there in Albany.
At the mass meeting at the Albany Civil Rights Movement.
And that's your hometown, correct?
It is my hometown, yes.
How long have you been singing the songs of the movement?
I've been singing these songs since 1961. So do the math. And I'm still singing.
Awesome. What would you say is the purpose or the meaning behind these songs?
The songs played a very vital role during the civil rights movement. Personally, I feel that without the songs of the civil rights movement, that wouldn't have been a movement. That's my personal thought.
What exactly is a freedom song? What makes a song a freedom song?
A freedom song is a song that you're talking about. Like, take for instance, if you were, let's see, if you're marching on doing a march or whatever the situation is that you would do this song. Say, for instance, I woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom, or oh, freedom. I ain't gonna let nobody turn me around because there are police and they stop you doing marches and they might beat you, so you never know. And the songs keep you going and keep you from being afraid.
Speaking of afraid, I'm glad you asked that, made that statement, because I was going to ask, was there ever a time during the movement where you were afraid?
Of course, you're afraid, but the songs keep you from being fearful, because you're saying, and my favorite song was "Walk with Me, Lord," because I knew that I needed Him to be beside me. I wasn't beaten, but I was dragged up the courthouse steps. Some people were beaten, some people were killed, but the songs were uplifting.
Were you ever arrested?
I was arrested 3 times for a total of 14 days.
Okay. And how did that feel to be in jail, knowing that you were protesting, but you were protesting and you were in the right?
Yeah, I was happy to be in jail. Most people say, "Why you say you were happy?" Because I was jailed for fighting for my rights, my equal rights, and I shouldn't have to do that.
What did you all do while you were in jail?
Sang and prayed. and ate wherever they fed us. I had a wonderful time in jail. I enjoyed my stay.
Well, this year for the Martin Luther King holiday, we're reflecting on the March on Washington.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if you had any memories that you could share with us about the March on Washington.
Well, the Freedom Singers were out in California, and we were asked to come and sing at the March on Washington. We had no idea how we were going to get there. Somehow, Harry Belafonte contacted Cordell Reagan, and he asked if we would ride on his plane. So that's how we got to the March on Washington, Harry Belafonte's private jet.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
You remember what you sang that day?
One of the songs was "We Shall Not Be Moved." That's the one that I led.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of songs, you've mentioned a couple of songs. You talked about your favorite song. You talked about song giving you courage. And we've talked now about songs at the March on Washington. I wondered if we could conclude our time with hearing a little bit of Miss Rutha Harris and one of those freedom songs.
All right, let's see. Wade in the water. Wade in the water, children. Wade in the water. God's gonna trouble the water. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. I'm gonna keep on walking, keep on talking, marching up to freedom land. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.
Well, Miss Harris, thank you so much for blessing us, that powerful voice and your testimony. And we thank you for being one of those sheroes of the civil rights movement. Without you, we wouldn't be where we are today.
Thank you for having me. I enjoyed it.
The program that day was filled with songs, remarks, and speeches by some of the more prominent figures of the civil rights movement at that time. But it would be the final speech delivered by the president of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., that would capture the spirit of the march as well as the historical memory of that day. Standing on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, symbolically chosen as the year 1963, represented the 100th anniversary of the signing of the Emancipation Proclamation, a promise of citizenship which King reminded us was still unfulfilled. In his remarks, Dr. King would call for an end to racism by invoking the promises of the Declaration of Independence, the Emancipation Proclamation, the Constitution, as well as the Scriptures. Interestingly enough, what the speech is most known for, the repeated use of that phrase, "I have a dream," was not included in his manuscript, as many of his close aides and advisors felt that the dream idea had been overused in previous speeches. Yet something spoke to King in that moment, and when he came to the end of his prepared remarks, he flipped over his script and he would turn the steps of the Lincoln Memorial into a pulpit, taking his audience to church as he expressed what it meant to live together as sisters and brothers. Dr. King would be introduced by A. Philip Randolph with these succinct yet profound words, describing King as, quote, a philosopher of a nonviolent system of behavior in seeking to bring about social change for the advancement of justice and freedom and human dignity. Randolph went on to say, "I have the pleasure to present to you Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr."
I am happy to join with you today in what will go down in history as the greatest demonstration for freedom in the history of our nation. Five score years ago, a great American in whose symbolic shadow we stand today signed the Emancipation Proclamation. This momentous decree came as a great beacon light of hope to millions of Negro slaves who had been seared in the flames of withering injustice. It came as a joyous daybreak to end the long night of their captivity. But 100 years later, the Negro still is not free. 100 years later, the life of the Negro is still sadly crippled by the manacles of segregation and the chains of discrimination. 100 years later, the Negro lives on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. 100 years later, the Negro is still languished in the corners of American society and finds himself in exile in his own land. And so we've come here today to dramatize a shameful condition. In a sense, we've come to our nation's capital to cash a check. When the architects of our republic wrote the magnificent words of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, they were signing a promissory note to which every American was to fall heir. This note was a promise that all men, yes, black men as well as white men, would be guaranteed the unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It is obvious today that America has defaulted on this promissory note insofar as her citizens of color are concerned. Instead of honoring this sacred obligation, America has given the Negro people a bad check, a check which has come back marked insufficient funds. But we refuse to believe that the Bank of Justice is bankrupt. We refuse to believe that there are insufficient funds in the great vaults of opportunity of this nation. So we've come to cash this check, a check that will give us upon demand the riches of freedom and the security of justice. We have also come to this hallowed spot to remind America of the fierce urgency of now. This is no time to engage in the luxury of cooling off or to take the tranquilizing drug of gradualism. Now is the time to make real the promises of democracy. Now is the time to rise from the dark and desolate valley of segregation to the sunlit path of racial justice. Now is the time to lift our nation from the quicksands of racial injustice to the solid rock of brotherhood. Now is the time to make justice a reality for all of God's children. It would be fatal for the nation to overlook the urgency of the moment. This sweltering summer of the Negro's legitimate discontent will not pass until there is an invigorating autumn of freedom and equality. 1963 is not an end, but a beginning. Those who hope that the Negro needed to blow off steam and will now be content will have a rude awakening if the nation returns to business as usual. There will be neither rest nor tranquility in America until the Negro is granted his citizenship rights. The whirlwinds of revolt will continue to shake the foundations of our nation until the bright day of justice emerges. But that is something that I must say to my people who stand on the warm threshold which leads into the palace of justice. In the process of gaining our rightful place, we must not be guilty of wrongful deeds. Let us not seek to satisfy our thirst for freedom by drinking from the cup of bitterness and hatred. We must forever conduct our struggle on the high plane of dignity and discipline. We must not allow our creative protests to degenerate into physical violence. Again and again, we must rise to the majestic heights of meeting physical force with soul force. The marvelous new militancy which has engulfed the Negro community must not lead us to a distrust of all white people. For many of our white brothers, as evidenced by their presence here today, have come to realize that their destiny is tied up with our destiny. They have come to realize that their freedom is inextricably bound to our freedom. We cannot walk alone. And as we walk, We must make the pledge that we shall always march ahead. We cannot turn back. There are those who are asking the devotees of civil rights, when will you be satisfied? We can never be satisfied as long as the Negro is the victim of the unspeakable horrors of police brutality. We can never be satisfied. As long as our body is heavy with the fatigue of travel, cannot gain lodging in the motels of the highways and the hotels of the cities. We cannot be satisfied as long as the Negro's basic mobility is from a smaller ghetto to a larger one. We can never be satisfied as long as our children are stripped of their selfhood and robbed of their dignity by signs stating for whites only. We cannot be satisfied as long as a Negro in Mississippi cannot vote and a Negro in New York believes he has nothing for which to vote. No, we are not satisfied, and we will not be satisfied until justice rolls down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. I am not unmindful that some of you have come here out of great trials and tribulation. Some of you have come fresh from narrow jail cells. Some of you have come from areas where your quest for freedom left you battered by the storms of persecution and staggered by the winds of police brutality. You have been the veterans of creative suffering. Continue to work with the faith that unearned suffering is redemptive. Go back to Mississippi. Go back to Alabama. Go back to South Carolina. Go back to Georgia. Go back to Louisiana. Go back to the slums and ghettos of our northern cities. Knowing that somehow this situation can and will be changed. Let us not wallow in the valley of despair. I say to you today, my friend, so even though we face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day, even the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering with the heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day, down In Alabama, with its vicious racists, with its governor having his lips dripping with the words of interposition and nullification. One day right there in Alabama, little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day every valley shall be exalted. And every hill and mountain shall be made low, the rough places will be made plain, and the crooked places will be made straight, and the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together. This is our hope. This is a faith that I go back to the South with. With this faith, we will be able to hew out of the mountain of despair a stone of hope. With this faith, we will be able to transform the jangling discords of our nation into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood. With this faith, we will be able to work together, to pray together, to struggle together, to go to jail together, to stand up for freedom together, knowing that we will be free one day. And this will be the day. This will be the day when all of God's children will be able to sing with new meaning, my country, tears of thee. Sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride. From every mountainside, let freedom ring. And if America is to be a great nation, this must become true. And so let freedom ring. From the prodigious hilltops of New Hampshire, let freedom ring. From the mighty mountains of New York, let freedom ring. From the heightening Alleghenies of Pennsylvania, let freedom ring. From the snow-capped Rockies of Colorado, let freedom ring. From the curvaceous slopes of California. But not only that, let freedom ring from Stone Mountain of Georgia. Let freedom ring from Lookout Mountain of Tennessee. Let freedom ring from every hill and molehill of Mississippi, from every mountainside. Let freedom ring, and when this happens, and when we allow freedom ring, when we let it ring from every village and every hamlet, from every state and every city, we will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual, free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free at last.
Thinking about the legacy of the March on Washington and where we go from here, there were clear gains that came about. The Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Yet even in the midst of these gains, we also suffered great loss. Within weeks of the March on Washington, the 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham would be bombed and 4 little girls would be killed. Later that fall, President Kennedy would be assassinated. As we look back these 60 years on the legacy of the March on Washington, we are reminded that freedom is indeed a constant struggle, and that the fight for freedom, justice, and equality continues today.
I've been walking with my face turned to the sun. weight on my shoulders, my heart won't be undone. Oh, I got eyes in the back of my head, just in case I had to run. I do what I can when I can, while I can for my people. As the clouds roll back and the stars fill the night, that's when I'm gonna stand up, take my people with me. Together we are going to a brand new home, far across the river. Can you hear freedom calling, calling me to answer? Gonna keep on keeping on. I can feel it in my bones. Early in the morning, before the sun begins to shine, we gotta start moving toward that separating line. I'm waiting for mighty waters. You know I got a made of mine, and I don't mind if I lose any blood on the way to salvation. And I'll fight with the strength that I've got until I die. So I'm gonna stand up, take my people with me. Together we are going to a brand new home, far across the river. Can you hear freedom calling, calling me to answer? Gonna keep on keeping on. And I know what's around the bend might be hard to face 'cause I'm alone, and I just might fail, but Lord knows I tried. Shooting stars fill up the sky. Stand up, take my people with me. Together we are going to a brand new home, far across the river. Can you hear freedom calling, calling me to answer? Gonna keep on keeping on. I'm gonna stand up, take my people with me. Together we are going to a brand new home, far across the river. Can you hear freedom calling, calling me to answer? Gonna keep on keeping on. I'm gonna stand up, take my people with me. Together we are going to a brand new home, far across the river. I hear freedom calling, calling me to answer. Gonna keep on keeping on. I can feel it in my bones. I go to prepare a place for you. I go to prepare a place for you. I go to prepare a place for you. I go to prepare a place for you.